Welcome back to Comic Book ER, the show where we take characters from comic books and adapt them into live action, all while giving respect to their comic book origins and in-universe film reasonable. I'm your host, Dr.Kleb, and any pictures, storyboards, characters, music, articles, etc. that you may see or hear are not owned by me and owned by their respective companies, organizations, writers, and musicians. Today, we face a character that you could say was born for this show's treatment. Today's victim, Man in Black Coat, Baron Helmut Zemo from Civil War, Marvel Comics. So this is how it's gonna work. Same as usual, just like making a new page for everyone. We're gonna learn the comic origin, the film origin, make a couple different outfits, and then we'll try to make an outfit that makes sense in that world. Yada 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 yada. But when it comes to character like Baron Helmut Zemo, there are 13 versions of Zemo in the comics. So we're just going to be. I can't mention Helmut Zemo without mentioning Heinrich Zemo. So we're going to be going over Heinrich Zemo's comic book origin and Helmut Zemo's comic book origin as well. So I guess technically we're making two Zemos, but because none of that is, well, you know what? We'll get to it. We'll get to it, but just know that this is all for Zemo. This is for all the Zemos. Alright, yeah, okay, right. Let's get into it. Okay, like I said, I can't mention the Zemos without mentioning Heinrich Zemo, which was the 12th version of Zemo, and Helmut Zemo, that we'll talk about in a second, is the 13th version of Zemo. So Heinrich was a scientist in the Nazi regime, the Third Reich, and while working for them, he invents all these inventions, but he gets noticed when he invents the death ray, a laser. And when he invents this laser, he gets backlash because of it, and people start harassing him and his family, so he has to wear a hood. And the Nazis give him land, and they give him a castle, which declares him a baron. So he is Baron Heinrich Zemo, and his wife is the Baroness, basically. And he's good to his family at first, but when he invents this product called Adhesive X, Captain America comes in to stop him, throws a shield at him, and the vial explodes onto his face, and his mask, it's forever stuck to his face, which he starts losing his mind. He goes insane. He starts kind of doing all these evil things, these immoral things. He starts treating his family horribly, abuses his family, and his family actually feels bad for him, only because he was once a good man, and apparently. And so he forever has this hatred for Captain America. And then the Zemos, they age very, very slowly. They're extremely intelligent. They're experts in weapons and fighting, and they're masters of them. Well, in the comics, he survives the modern age, the 12th Zemo, and he's the one that forms the Masters of Evil to take down the Avengers. But during a fight with one of them, with one of the Avengers, he creates an avalanche, which ultimately causes his death. And he wears like purple, kind of this purple long coat, which kind of helps me insinuate the differences between him, because him and his son look very, very similar. And he wears the purple to insinuate that he's in power. He's German, of course, in this background. And he wears the yellow gloves, the belt, the mask, of course, welded to his face. So Baron Helmut Zemo is the one who's most awfully known in the comics, and he's the most popular one. You know, he survives the longest. He takes his father's legacy on, and his mask is not stuck to his face, but he has a deal of his own problems. But he has a very huge love for his father, even though his father was kind of abusive to him at the end. He basically blamed Captain America for destroying his father's sanity, and he felt like that ever since the accident happened, his father was never the same. He took over the family name, and actually at first, in order to get it back at Captain America, he assimilated the identity as a character known as the Phoenix, which was in Captain America number 168, and that was the first time he ever wore the suit known as the Phoenix. And It was a red and yellow costume, very hard to bring into live action, but we'll figure it out. And then after that, Falcon came in to save him. He busted through the window. Cap was tied up to a thing, and he had a whole vat of adhesive X. And basically, what happened is when they busted in, uh, he told him about his origin, but like you messed up my father and his hatred for Captain America. Helmut Zemo gets thrown into the vat of adhesive X, and because he wasn't wearing a mask at the time, it heavily scarred him, which is what turned him into Baron Helmut Zemo in the comics, which you see him wear the kind of pink purplish mask, and he's super intelligent. He goes on to create the Thunderbolts, which are a super team of villains that pretend to be heroes, and then they betray him, and then he was known as Citizen V. So, with all that history with Helmut Zemo in the comics, you would think that he would have also an extensive history in the movies. Well, let me tell you his entire origin in the films. So in the films, he's Sokovian. He is the colonel of armed forces, like a death squad of Sokovia, I guess. And he says he's a criminal mastermind he comes home and his family, his son sees Iron Man out the window, and then later on, because of what happened in the movie Age of Ultron, his family gets killed. And there's no reason why he should wear a costume in this film version. I mean, there is a version where in the show Winter Soldier, Falcon and the Winter Soldier, he wears like a purple mask, and he kind of has like a little pink on him. But honestly, as good as attempt as it seems, he only wears this for literally like 5 minutes, not even 5 minutes in the entire show. So I think that this live action portrayal of his costume is actually kind of it's false. He doesn't wear it the entire. He doesn't even he barely wears this for even a single scene. And so it seems that when it comes to the comics, he's got kind of a tactical, but it seems that he wears like purple to insinuate that he's royalty. He thinks highly of himself, he thinks highly of his father, so he wears these colors that say I'm better than you, basically, kind of thing. Which the ruffles all over him kind of give the idea that he's royalty, but he's not like a British royalty. He's like trying to be better than even that. And then so when it comes to the suit that he wears in Civil War specifically, he just wears normal clothes, and his entire backstory with his father is deleted. His father basically doesn't exist. There is no Heinrich Zemo. It's just like, I think the only thing he mentions is that he found his father holding his children. And if you knew the comics, you know that his father was killed in an avalanche, which is kind of like, I guess, but that's the only thing that connects it. And besides that, he takes on the alias of this Theo Broissard guy, who is like a therapist in the movie for Winter Soldier. Then he pretends to be Winter Soldier, and he also pretends to be this other guy, which is kind of a trait that you would find in the Chameleon. But I've always kind of said that the character in the Civil War was more of the Chameleon character with the name Baron Zemo. He was not even Zemo. There was no family royalty backstory. It was all deleted. His hatred for Captain America in the films doesn't really make sense because it's surface level. Like, he doesn't have like such a deep-seated hatred for Captain America where he was personally wronged, his family was wronged, his father's reputation was ruined. He has no father, Zemo. There is no, like, his face is perfectly normal. He just looks like it. The problem is, though, in the movies, he plays a good villain, the actor who plays him. And he's portrayed by Daniel Bruhl, which this guy, he's a great actor. And even he said when he finished Civil War, he felt bad that he didn't wear a mask because the character is such a long family history. And it was completely deleted. I don't know what the reasoning. Maybe they were scared to do the Phoenix arc and they acted like they couldn't fit it. But we're going to find a way that we can fit in the Phoenix arc into Civil War and make it make sense. We're going to make costume for Phoenix that makes sense. We're also going to make 4 different scenes in the movie that could have existed that makes sense for the Civil War film specifically, just because that was his first appearance and it's the most important one. Once again, I'm gonna try to adapt the comic book into live action, but at the same time, I'm gonna try to use as little as like I'm gonna try not to use the color black because it seems that in the films they heavily rely on the color black, and I'm gonna show you can make a live action costume and not cut like Captain America could walk around in blue, a whole bright blue costume, red, white, and blue, but Zemo can't get his comic accurate form. You know, I say that's bullshit, and I'm gonna show you what we're gonna do about it. So basically, what he's gonna do there is he's gonna make a whole bunch of sketches in pencil, and then he's gonna go back and retrace them and color them. But while he's doing that, I just want to explain that it can be hard, it can be difficult to adapt a character like Zemo because he's so brightly colored. But Helmut Zemo should be easy because you really, honestly, in the comics, he does wear a lot of like basically just wears the mask and the gloves. But because I'm trying to not use black because that was such a pet peeve for me that people just like taking characters who look really cool and they like putting black clothing on them and thinking that that's like original. They keep taking characters who have like capes, characters who have awesome costumes, and reducing them to black pants, black shirt, and they just look fucking stupid. And it's just so dull, that there's no life in the character. And rewatching Civil War, it's honestly one of my favorite Marvel movies. But rewatching it with the knowledge in mind, just thinking about Zemo's character has always fucking bothered me. But it's bothered me now more than anything else because they didn't just like they eventually gave him the mask, which is kind of at that point they gave him the mask for like 5 minutes, which is a sin. He should have started out wearing a mask. He should have. So I think what they were trying to go with within the movie was they were trying to go with the fact that he's just a normal guy. He's just a human. He can take down the Avengers when Loki, who's a god, who Ultron was a robot, couldn't take down the Avengers. The superpowered AI, this god. He even mentions that in the movie. His lines, however, he talks like Zemo, but he looks nothing like Zemo. It's almost like this isn't Baron Helmut Zemo. This is Larry Zemo. Larry. Just a guy named Larry. And they repeatedly show you his face over and over and over again. And I think that was the first mistake. And you may think, well, there are scenes where he's literally like a therapist for Bucky. How can you do that scene without him wearing normal clothes, right? Easy. You first off, they didn't know who he was in that scene. So, don't show his face. Show him maybe behind the back where he's like got his mask off, but do not show his face. I think that's so important is that when you have a character that's like a secret character, like Zemo was, where he was the secret one behind everything in the movie, you completely have to hide him. And then the reason why I think this is the way it should have been is because when you get to the final ending of the movie and he's wearing his mask the whole time, and he is like trying to destroy the Avengers. When they get to the end, when they demask him, they can be like, "Oh my God, he's just a guy, right? He's just a human." And I think that's important because you live in a world with gods and monsters and heroes and sorcerers and green monsters. I think it's perfectly fine to put a character in his purple mask. If you can have Spider-Man running around in tighties, pajamas, and you can have Drax looking the way that he does, and you have Thor, characters like Groot are made out of fucking trees. You can have a character who's literally a fucking planet, but you can't give a guy a little bit of purple and yellow. Stupid. And so this, what I'm drawing here, is I'm drawing a couple of sketches from Heinrich Zemo, kind of merging ideas that I think could work in the film. The one that I'm drawing there is him like basically reflecting on the fact that he can't like get the mask off his face, which the history of a character is so fucking important to the character. Like there'd be like If I did what Marvel has done with Zemo and apply it to any other character, imagine if you had like Batman for an entire movie, like 2 hour movie, and he was just Bruce Wayne the whole film, never wore his costume, but at the very, very, very end, he put on the bat mask. Didn't put on the cape, just put the mask on for like 5 minutes and then threw it off. That's kind of what they did with Zemo. And then he acts like a completely different character. Like Zemo is so secretive and he's so intelligent, and it's just like the reason that they learned about him and fought him, like they learned that Zemo was behind it, is because of his fucking face. They literally do a scan on his face. He's walking around, he's like super intelligent, but he's walking around letting cameras touch him, There are characters like who wear masks that could glitch out cameras and stuff. He lives in that universe where that's a possible thing. You don't have to have him walking around being like, oh, he's a death squad, and he's a genius, but he's not smart enough to not look at every fucking camera he ever walks by. Realistically, Civil War should have not happened to the movies, because honestly, they should have looked at one camera and been like, oh, it's this guy. Boom, down. Because we know in reality, when the government wants to find someone, they find someone immediately. As opposed to someone who nobody's looking for. A guy who bombs the UN will be found instantly. And I know what you're thinking. You're like, oh yeah, in the movie he puts on him, he tries to look like Winter Soldier. Yeah, that's great. Winter Soldier's already on the run. He's already being looked for. But Zemo is just kind of walking around. He even kills a guy in like a parking lot in a deleted scene. And, he puts on his stuff. And I think every scene that they used for Zemo should have not been there. I really think it ruins the film. It's like, Baron Zemo had the best lines, of course, in Civil War. But looking back, looking at him in the, like, when he's like, the very second, okay, here's this. The very first scene you see with him, he gets into a car crash, and he purposely smashes his vehicle against this guy who was like a Nazi back in the day. And they're working so hard to be like, oh, we don't want you to know that this is Zemo, so we're going to make him dress like a normal guy. The very first scene you get with him, he goes, my name is Zemo. And you were like, oh, he's Zemo. This is what's going to happen. We should have never seen his face. That should have never happened. He should have found a way to sneak in there, and the beginning scene should have been like him taking out that guy, but then him looking at the book, and then the scenes where he's just like in his apartment, his fake, like a little hotel, and he's like reading the book to himself. He already knows that shit. He doesn't need to practice the fucking language. He already knows it. What you should have had is instead of a scene where you're like just showing him reading shit, it should have been more about his backstory, or him doing shit in the costume, so you think that he's like super powerful, him with his minions. And so here's my problem though, is a lot of people think that because he has a crazy costume, yellow and red, that it's not possible to adapt into live action. Him as the Phoenix doesn't make any sense. Well, it does. It can make sense because it's possible. It's not hard. You have to use imagination. Don't be afraid of a little color. Don't be afraid to, in the very beginning of the movie, they take down Crossbones, right? And I hate that, like, every single moment of this movie, but I'm kind of like rewriting this movie a little bit, because I think that Zemo should have been in that scene with Crossbones. They were trying to be like, oh, look, it's Crossbones, It's he's a character we've been waiting for a long time. We've been waiting for Russo to turn into Crossbones, which the way they adapted him in live action, perfect. He looks awesome. The person that should have been working next to him, random thugs, sure. They're also Hydra. They should have been dressed like Hydra. There should have been the character known as the Phoenix, which I'm drawing currently. That should have been in the thing. Like, he should have had sidekicks, at the least, just Crossbones, and then maybe like an apprentice he's like training, or would you think that that's what it is? Like, Crossbones the one in charge, but then when the moment happens, and I think where it kind of ruins it for me is where Crossbones just kind of ditches the car and thinks that he's gonna get away on foot, which is fucking stupid because his intention was to blow up Captain America. Why start with the vehicle? You know what I mean? Like, why not just start on foot? But whatever. Let's just say that this character, the Phoenix, was with him, and I honestly think it should have been where there should have been that scene should have been longer because when I go back and I look at that scene uh, with Crossbones and he's having the moment with Captain America, he explodes, and then Wanda kind of doesn't know what to do with him. She like puts him in a little bubble, throws him up, a building has exploded, and that's it. Doesn't I don't think it really honestly other people who watch movies they think this leaves an impact. I really don't think it does. I really think it's really a soft opening because what would have made it even better is if it was more than just that. Like there was a character Phoenix who was with Crossbones, and Crossbones and him were arguing about the plan. And then Phoenix says, "Oh, the boss says the plan needs to be this, and it should have been this." And at some point they get the vial. Maybe they get separated. The Phoenix wants to take down Captain America for his own reasons, and then they side together because Crossbones has his own things that he's got against Captain America. And I honestly think there should have been a moment where, of course, Russell went rogue and Crossbones blows himself up. And when this happens, it is a huge, much bigger impact than it is in the movie. Like, it literally kills, like, hundreds of fucking people. And Captain America is taken from that side. I think it should have went on longer. I think it ended way too quick. Captain America should have went missing. It should have been dragged out to the point where it was ridiculous. Because in the comics, when that happened, when that explosion happened, it was so big that it turned the entire world against the Avengers. The Avengers, like, the people didn't trust the Avengers anymore. They didn't trust any heroes. It was a big moment. But in the movie, it's just kind of like, oh, it's just this one neighborhood. It was not even a neighborhood. It was like this one part of one building. Like, the building should have came tumbling down. There should have been way more fucking damage. Captain America should have been kidnapped. And this character knows the Phoenix. Could have been like, this is Crossbones went rogue, and this is what I should have done. And just like in the comics, Falcon and then the others would have tried to find him after they secure the vial. Captain America gets saved by Falcon, and the explosion keeps like blowing up other buildings till they get to the building that they're in. Phoenix takes off his mask. He says, "Oh, this is for my father." Falls into a vat of adhesive X. Captain America doesn't know who that guy is. He doesn't know what he's talking about, and I think he should have been. That should have been how it ended. It should have ended right there, and then later on, the next scene is like them mourning the loss of all these people. But I think that would have been much more impactful. I just think it wasn't enough. I think it was sped up way too much, and so I think though later on when you show Baron's Helmut Zemo, he should have been the costume, and you shouldn't really tell anyone the connections between Phoenix and Zemo yet, because if you know the comics, you know that Phoenix is Zemo. But this could give Captain America not only heartache from the explosion, but it would give him like another thing to solve, where he's already got Hydra out there, remnants of Hydra. He's got uh, just all these villains out there ready to get him, and it's just kind of a more comic book realistic universe where it's not just like, oh, what's the villain of this month, because in the comic book world everything's happening all the time, and there's no breaks. You don't get fucking breaks. So I think all the scenes should have been replaced with where Zemo's alone. He should have been with like maybe remnants of Hydra, or maybe he's just got random thugs because he doesn't respect Hydra. He just works with them to get what he wants. And I think that should have been clear. Maybe you should have shown scenes where he was in the mask, like in this mask, the one I'm making now. And I think what would have been great is after that, he goes to his father, like the damage of his house. Like he mentions the Age of Ultron, that his house was destroyed, and it could have been like, maybe his father was in there doing an experiment, and it happened at the same time, killed his father, but then maybe when he comes back, defeated and scarred as the Phoenix, he's just throwing everything everywhere, and that's another scene I'm going to draw here. But I think it would have been much more impactful. Where you show him falling into the vat of adhesive X at the very beginning, and then you don't mention who that guy was. All Cap hears is, "You killed you. This is for my father." And Cap has had so many adventures, so many villains he's fought. He doesn't know who that guy is. He doesn't know what he's talking about. And so when it comes to later on, Cap has much more of like a heavy heart on him. And I just think it would have been much more important if he did it that way. But in the movies, they're terrified. They're absolutely terrified to give the character, you know, their colors and their comic book forms, and they rely way too heavily on the color black. And I know that in the comics he wears black, and but I'm gonna go with the challenge today of trying not to do black. He kind of comes home, and maybe they've put the cases like maybe these people came, and because his family's royalty, cleanup crew was just putting like his father's most treasured stuff, or maybe they were so strong that they stayed there, you know. And in the version that I think would be coolest is if you didn't really reveal his information until the very end. Like it's a secret. You see him in the costume as Baron Zemo. You see him wearing the purple mask and wearing his father's coat. But the plot points do not have to be pointed out until the very end. You literally could fit so much into the very end, and I think it would make it much. It would make it much more accurate because Zemo would not just walk around showing his face everywhere. He's a very secretive guy. He's German, for God's sake. He's supposed to. He's Sokovian in this version, but he really is German. Um, and they're fucking very secretive people, you know. And so I think doing that as the beginning, and these scenes can come on later. And when they show like a lot of the scenes where he's by himself and he's like building shit, the scene where he's talking to the book should have happened. He should have been reading it, and then someone should have came in and said, "Oh, we're ready for something," and the guy could have been like, "Oh, you're not as good as the Red Skull," right? And then Zemo could have killed him, showing him that he doesn't care about Hydra. He's just kind of using them to his own advantage, and I think a lot of those scenes would have made more sense. You would have been like, "Oh, yes," because in the very first scene, you let us know that he is Zemo, right? And so the very first time you see him as Zemo, he should have been that. It should have been a guy wearing a mask, and he should have been, "My name is Zemo," because when you see him as the Phoenix, all the dialogue you should ever do is just be like, I'm aware that in the comics that when he falls into Adhesive X, he reveals the whole origin of his family. But in the movie sense, I don't think it would make much sense if he revealed it right then and there. So I think it would make sense if he did it later on. So all he could say is like, "This is for my father," and then he falls in. And Cap doesn't need to know the whole story right away. But after they're fighting Iron Man and they're fighting Winter Soldier, they're all fighting each other, and Cap he gets away, and there could be a scene where Black Panther is fighting Baron Zemo, because it's just kind of like Larry Zemo just kind of shoots himself, like he just wants to die, which I understand. A lot of people think that's like a badass way to go out, and it's not. It's kind of like it's kind of like, oh, he's getting away with it, right? But it's kind of just like he just wants to die, right? If you knew the character Zemo, Baron Helmut Zemo, he wouldn't do that. He would just take on another fake identity and just pretend to do it. And you can still have it where his family dies, but I think his father should have been much more pointed out throughout the film. And because the movies are afraid to give history to Zemo for some reason, I kind of took it upon myself to just kind of do it. So I kind of made a sketch that you seen probably earlier, where I showed Heinrich Zemo. Heinrich Zemo kind of has like a bigger build. His mask is kind of baggier. But I kind of thought maybe there should have been like a scene where Zemo's thinking about his father, and he sees his father looking at himself in the mirror, just wishing he didn't look the way that he did, and maybe he saw his father conducting experiments, losing his mind, hurting him, that kind of stuff. and it's all that Zemo thinks about. You know, you can have a scene where it starts where he's thinking about his father, and it's one of those scenes, and then you zoom out and you see Baron Zemo, which still doesn't really tie the character of the Phoenix to it. It just adds more confusion, which is good. You want more confusion at in the middle parts, you know. But when they finally get to the moment, I think what the design that I did was it took Heinrich Zemo and maybe their argument was like, oh, his mask doesn't make sense because how is he going to eat? Right? He has a mask connected to his face. How's he going to eat? How's he going to do normal shit? For one, he's not going to do normal shit. His life is. He loses his sanity after that happens. So, maybe you have a flashback where Captain America remembers something that he did that he feels bad about. You know, maybe they gave him wrong intel, and it could be him reflecting upon the Sokovia Accords to accept it or not, and him remembering, oh, this was a time when someone gave me bad information, and the Heinrich Zemo was just inventing shit, and he was just inventing like a adhesive glue, and Cap came in thinking that he was gonna create more lasers and nukes and shit, and he just threw his shield, you know, when he was young, and splashed it into the guy's face, turning him into a much more bare threat. But I think that should have been during like the first Avenger days, where it should have flashed back for Cap and Helmut Zemo, both thinking about this guy, where Cap's just trying to understand who that guy at the beginning was, and so the version that I did, it was after. So my adaptive story is basically like after that scene, he goes to the remnants of his house, which is all destroyed, and he makes a copy of his father's mask, or maybe he wears his father's mask and fixes it. But in the version I thought that maybe he wanted to respect his father's wishes, you know, respect his father's space, and he made his own mask. He put it on his father's coat, which is kind of why I gave Zemo a coat there. But just the evolution of a costume, I think, is really good. You know, where he could wear the coat and he's wearing it to respect his father because he's kind of doing something that his father wanted to do, which is take down Captain America. But he's doing it on a much bigger scale. Like he's not just trying to take down Captain America; he's trying to take down the Avengers as well, which I think is kind of a step up. You know, uh, but the yellow gloves, you know, he puts on the yellow gloves. Then he's got the boots. But instead of doing the weird little shape crown, I kind of made it more of like an actual crown. So Heinrich Zemo has like the taller little crown thorns like on his mask that was welded to his face. And then, you know, he tried to get his mask off, so he's like got scissors and he's like cutting it up, which made the crease in it, which I think would be a cool image. And also probably even cooler fucking action figure, since all they care about is selling stuff. And I don't know. I think that looks better. And so, you know, instead of using like in the comics, he has like kind of like a softer look. I think the diamond shape on his helmet, on his like mask, kind of gives him a more like a royalty crown look, and it kind of looks stronger, I believe. And also, what I've done with the Phoenix costume adaptation is I've taken the version from 1973, which you can tell it was still in the time of characters wearing capes and tidy whities and shit. But I kind of enjoy the fact that they didn't go full tidy whities. They just kind of went with like ripped ones, which his suit's not really that bad. But if you're a tight executive in a movie, you're gonna think it looks silly. So I adapted it, and so the version I have, I adapted the cape to act as like a device that like protects him from the sand. You know, maybe when he kidnaps Captain America in this scene right here that I'm drawing, maybe he goes to an area that's more sandy. You know, so he's got a cape that like protects his face from the sand. I decided to go half mask too, because I just felt like it would make more sense. And I couldn't get the half mask to work as a full mask without him literally just looking like a copycat character. So I was trying to kind of make him have an original look. And even though he's not wearing all this tactical gear in the comics, he is wielding a gun. And he has all these weapons. And in the real world, obviously, he would have all these weapons on him. and gave him goggles for like the sand and everything. So yeah, that's a major change that I would make. That he would wear the costume throughout the where he's got his father's coat and he's wearing his own version of his father's outfit basically. And after his fight with Black Panther, that they demask him and they learn that he is just a guy. You know, they think that he's just like this powerful figure like Loki and Ultron, but he's actually just a guy, which is the point they were trying to make in the film. But I think it has a more powerful effect when you think that he's this powerful character, but then you demask him and you're like, oh, he's just a guy. A guy took down the Avengers. You know, which is that is what they were trying to do. But when they finally demask him, you could see that the what the adhesive X had on his face, and then Cap can come out after they beat the shit out of Iron Man, basically. And you'd be like, oh, this is the same guy that tried to bomb us in the beginning, which brings the movie full fucking circle because they actually left that part out in the movie. In the very beginning, Cap literally is like, "Why is Crossbones like? Who's he serving?" Right, and it's nobody. There's nobody buying that thing, and it's just implied that it's Zemo. So just to point out that, and then maybe he tells them, "Oh, this was my plan all along," right? And then other scenes like when he was trying to fuck with the Winter Soldier, like, "Who are you? What do you want?" And he's like, "To see an empire fall," which would be much more sinister if he was in his costume. But you know, this is basically what I ended up with. And these are other scribbles I came up with that I drew off screen at first that eventually turned into the ones that you've seen.